a lot of technology has gone into NVS1. Thankfully, it is indigenous technology. Thankfully, we now have indigenous atomic clocks, space-grade atomic clocks that have been built by the Space Applications Center of ISRO, which is located in Ahmedabad. And then you now have academic institutions in India, universities, as well as private companies who are gearing up to develop atomic clocks, as well as all the spin-off technologies that come along with it.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan and welcome to another edition of the Gist, where we are focusing on the launch by the Indian Space Research Organization of the Navigation Satellite Second Generation Series. This is the first satellite of its kind. We expect more will go up, which will form up the Indian satellite navigation system called NAVIC. My guest is Chaitanya Giri, editor of Interstellar, our sister space website. Chaitanya, glad to have you again.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Chaitanya, this latest launch, just let's give our viewers a sense of how important is it and how does it augment our own indigenous navigation capabilities vis-a-vis GPS?
You know, for any country, positioning, navigating, and timing, which are collectively known as the PNT systems, are quite important. And this is not a modern phenomena. You've seen in the past, timekeeping has been the prerogative of kings and the courtiers of the kings and the emperors. So timekeeping is very necessary for strategic systems. Timekeeping is very necessary for people who work 9 to 5, especially on stock markets, because the time that you invest the money in and the price that you pick up for that particular time, for that particular moment, is very crucial. It shouldn't be the case that you buy something at a higher price and then you get a lower price for it. So a higher price is appreciated, but you don't need a lower price. So even for that, PNT systems are extremely crucial. So not just military, but also for running a national economy or for running stock exchanges, a PNT system is especially important. Now, India hasn't had a PNT system very early. We've been so-called second generation PNT system holders. The first generation was, dominated by the Americans and the global positioning system. So much so that GPS has become synonymous with PNT systems. So people call NAVIC, or they have been calling NAVIC over the past few years as India's GPS. But it's not that. It is India's PNT system. So that's the accurate word to be used. So why GPS got famous? Because firstly, pioneers' advantage. They started very early. Secondly, GPS became very crucial when American forces began going expeditionary. So during the Afghan War of the 80s, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Kuwait War, then the Afghan operations in Operation Desert Storm, 2001, War on Terror. So all these things really kept the momentum going for GPS for strategic applications. At the same time, the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, these have been very crucial sort of stakeholders or end users of the GPS system. So GPS, all these years, it has been providing services to two types of customers. So a slightly inaccurate, I won't say very inaccurate, but a slightly inaccurate service is provided to the low-end users, which are non-strategic applications. But for strategic applications, which also includes the stock exchanges, it is the more precise service. So that has been the case. We've heard stories about India not getting access
Yes.
to the GPS during the Kargil war, where we wanted to find out the hideouts of the terrorist groups that were occupying high positions. So that was when we decided NAVIC should come in. I'm glad that today we are seeing the second generation of NAVIC satellites, which have been now renamed as NVS-1. And it is the first of the next, there'll be a few more 7 odd satellites to be launched in the coming few months. And as ISRO chairman Somnath recently said that we'll have a launch every month. And what I actually now I'm trying to decipher is that you count in these many remaining NAVIC satellites, then you have the Chandrayaan, then you have the Gaganyaan mission, then you have the Aditya L1, and cumulatively there will be the other few remote sensing missions lined up. So overall, the launch sort of schedule looks quite busy for ISRO. And in this launch schedule, we are also trying to graduate the NAVIC system. So the previous NAVIC system was using atomic clocks, which are necessary to provide that accurate timing. And we were procuring these atomic clocks from some European vendors. So atomic clocks were not made in India. At least the space grade atomic clocks were not made in India. We've been making atomic clocks for quite some time. Here in Delhi, you have the National Physical Laboratory, which is run by the CSIR. It has been working on atomic clocks since independence, nearly independence. Precision clocks, they later on got the name of atomic clocks. We've been at it. We've been working on those lines. But the space grade atomic clocks are a bit different. They are highly miniaturized. They have to work in that sort of environment which is hostile to any electronic equipment. Yet at the same time, it has to be of lower mass, of lower weight, because you can't lift that much weight as you would require for an atomic clock which is built here for earthly applications. So a lot of water has flown, a lot of technology has gone into NVS-1. Thankfully, it is indigenous technology. Thankfully, we now have indigenous atomic clocks, space-grade atomic clocks that have been built by the Space Applications Center of ISRO, which is located in Ahmedabad. And then you now have academic institutions in India, universities, as well as private companies who are gearing up to develop atomic clocks, as well as all the spin-off technologies that come along with it, especially atomic clock compatible semiconductor chips, so on and so forth. So we are getting there. This is actually a sort of a walled garden of technologies where you build a wall first. Atomic clock is the wall, and a host of other technologies will come around it. And not only technologies, but applications will come around it, which will be entirely in our control because the clock is indigenous.
And the launch vehicle used was the GSLV, which means the cryogenic engine. So that technology has matured, you would say?
It is maturing with every launch. For any system of systems, a rocket is a system of systems. There are quite a few components, or there are thousands of components there. And every group of scientists working on one single rocket is looking after one single system or group of systems there. So those who have been working on cryogenic systems, they have sort of gotten control over it. The leash is in their hands now. And we are now in an era where we'll start playing with these cryogenic engines. We'll make them smaller, we'll make them bigger. The heavy lift launches that are to come up. The current heavy lift launcher is LVM-3. Then there will be something known as the next generation launch vehicle. All these will use cryogenic engines in a big way. And the experience that we accrue with GSLV Mark II or GSLV Mark III right now will help us further develop cleaner fuels. The entire idea of semi-cryogenic is that you want to really lift heavy weight, weight that is not precisely possible with solid fuel rockets, or you don't really want to carry that much liquid, that much liquid fuel when you're lifting something which is about 10 tons. So for that, cryogenic engines are extremely important. We are going there. And the other aspect is, which is now coming up in a big way, and that is sustainability, where there is a growing emphasis on discarding solid fuels and opting for cleaner fuels. So it is not just about electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles here on Earth, but it is also about discarding the solid fuel launch vehicles and replacing them with rockets that are using cleaner fuels. So like methalox is one fuel. Then cryogenic fuels are of course very clean because they're just really cool hydrogen and oxygen, and so on and so forth. So there are the fuels which are in the making. So again, that's an entirely different story from NVS-1. But the beauty of this mission is that there's so much happening in terms of indigenization. Atomic clocks, we did not have it as of now. We are mastering over it. Cryogenic engines. It has been a tough ride for us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so we are getting there. And with more and more missions, what I believe is we'll get into the nitty-gritties of these, high-end technologies. We'll make them better. We'll outdo a few countries around us while we make them better. And that's the crux of, advancing in terms of technologies.
But the advance has been slow, would you say? Because NAVIC itself is in a fairly early stage.
NAVIC is in fairly early stage, so if you compare it with the GPSs, the Europeans have been asking India.
For NAVIC?
No, not for NAVIC, but they were quite keen, especially European Union. It has been quite keen that India develops its positioning, navigating, timing system, PNT system, along with them. So there were talks some 15 years ago where the Galileo system, which they eventually built, was supposed to be built along with India.
I see.
It didn't culminate because we realized that we have to take the long solitary path, the Ekla Chalo Re, and we did that. And I'm glad we did that because if you look at some other examples that Europe is now struggling with, it doesn't have a fifth generation fighter aircraft.
But they're developing something.
They're developing something, but they're late to the party.
True.
Whereas Europe should have built a fifth generation fighter aircraft much earlier.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So a lot of dependencies is what they've accrued. They're now dependent heavily on China with respect to trade, with respect to market. They're very much dependent on America with respect to security. So we didn't want to be in that situation. And that's the reason why it took us a bit longer, but we have indigenous technology at hand right now. And there are Indian companies, there are Indian academic and scientific institutions, there are Indian strategic institutions which are taking note of these technologies. And I am sure that there will be a nice ecosystem building out, especially of downstream applications. So for instance, the first generation NAVIC that you saw, the Indian government made it mandatory for it to be used in all the government-led programs. So for instance, the Indian Railways, the engines, they use NAVIC system. Otherwise, if you remember an era where trains, especially during winters, they used to ply late because of fog.
Always, yeah.
Always, yeah. And there, the control and command station of the Indian Railways used to be unaware where the train is. So to get over that, the end users, Indian Railways was made end user. The Road and Transport Ministry is a big end user. Of course, Ministry of Defense is a big end user. And more recently, when India started assembling phones in India, mobile phones in India, we made sure that some of the chip manufacturers that have been supplying chips for our mobile phones, we made sure that these companies build chips that are compatible with NAVIC. So these are not Indian companies, these are not Indian semiconductor companies, these are American companies, but we made sure that they make chips that are compatible with NAVIC, because if you have to sell NAVIC onto your mobile phone, you need the chips that go into it to be using NAVIC or to be compatible with NAVIC.
So this is a 2 or 3 year old phone. It wouldn't be compatible with NAVIC.
It should be 2 or 3 years. It should be. I mean, all the phones that have come after, let's say, 2018, 2019 are more or less, especially the Android phones, they are more or less compatible with NAVIC systems. So we are talking about strategic applications, and we are talking about which are niche. The market is small, but we are also talking about the enormous, market base
Scope,
which is there for commercial applications of NAVIC. So from your Zomato to your Swiggy, your NetMed, your 1mg.
So there are huge commercial,
huge commercial implications for this.
We're looking at $1 billion, business.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. Right. So that's why PNT is the elusive technology that every country wants, because it opens up an enormous market, a domestic market. And if you really have a technology that can go global, then it opens up access to international markets. GPS has done that for itself. So GPS has earned enormous revenue for the United States all these years. And with growing competition now to the GPS, in terms of the Russians have the GLONASS, the Chinese have the Baidu, then we have this, Galileo is what I spoke of, then GNZSS, the Japanese have it.
But the other ones are not very well known. The Japanese one you mentioned, even Galileo, is it that, are they that strong? Are they that networked like GPS?
See, again, GPS got the pioneer's advantage, as I said, and it went global right from the very beginning. Whereas some of these systems remained regional. So IRNSS, the earlier name for NAVIC, and the earlier name for now NVS, was or is regional. So if you look at the areas in which it operates, it spans from the eastern seaboard of Africa, so the Indian Ocean coast of Africa, so down south to, let's say, Madagascar. It goes up to Perth, then it goes up to Okinawa Islands, roughly, southern Japan, and so on and so forth.
That's a huge area.
That's a huge area, but it's not global. So you have to go global. But for going global, you need a rationale for going global. And I believe one of the rationales of going global would be that, number one, India is wanting to be a voice of the global south. So that could be one rationale. It's a foreign policy rationale. If you really want to ensure security of your maritime trade, and our maritime trade pathways are really wide, and it will get even wider. So to ensure security of your trade routes, you will need an indigenous navigation system that is global and not regional and not limited to one ocean.
The strategic implications, you mentioned the armed forces are using the indigenous GPS. Given that we seem to be replacing the older variant of the navigation satellites with the newer lot, does that imply a break in service or is there some backup of some kind?
So there is backup of some time. So it's not a break-in service. It's actually a continuation of service. So once we have all the second generation satellites lined up, it will sort of seamlessly integrate, pass on the service from the first generation to the second generation, or co-work or co-function. Nothing has been revealed yet. This is my conjecture, because some of these things are kept
deliberately.
Deliberately, people remain quiet, and they should be. I mean, it's justified. But they'll make sure that there's no break-in services. But yes, it was in the news sometime around 2018 when the previous generation NAVIC satellites, the first generation, the atomic clocks on them, they broke down. So we don't want to come across that situation once again. And even if they break down, you should be able to diagnose what exactly led to that situation. And for that very reason, ISRO took upon itself that they'll build the atomic clocks.
Do you see this thing? I mean, we know of ISRO, handing over a lot of its projects and work to the private sector. You see this atomic thing too transitioning to the private sector?
Partly yes, partly no. So, so the commercial sector will be very much interested in procuring something that is viable and something that is less accurate also. So that is something that will be passed on, or the previous generation. When I say less accurate, the previous generation. But whatever is at the bleeding edge will remain with ISRO.
Okay, the cutting edge stuff will be, which will be strategic.
Yes, it will remain with ISRO. It will remain with the strategic scientific agencies of India. And the reason for it is, it has been so everywhere in the world.
Yeah, true. So, launch vehicles, you mentioned cryogenic engines that ISRO has developed over years. These are seen as a strategic asset. Obviously they are. But do you see them being commercialized in that sense for the private sector to use?
Launch vehicles? Yes. So eventually, see, there have been talks where the PSLV has been regularly mentioned, and this has been mentioned by ISRO itself, that it will eventually be passed on to the private sector fully. That is yet to happen, but whenever that happens, that step will be welcomed by all. And there are contenders for it. And these contenders, they're not new to PSLV. They have worked on the PSLV system for ages now. They have been with ISRO forever. Forever. So it is just that they've been building certain components, and these companies will come together eventually to build the entire system. Now PSLV again is a bygone era system. It is proven, it is workhorse, but it is still a bygone era system now. You have to now update it. And that's why there are attempts to build something known as the next generation launch vehicle, which is a modular system, which is an expendable system. It can be, it can carry smaller satellites, it can carry bigger spacecrafts and whatnot. But that is in the works right now. So we are at least 5 to 10 years away from the next generation launch vehicle. But until then, what I feel is the older generation rockets, they need to be given to the private sector for sure. And I see a situation where, just like the Americans have, they have a coalition of something known as United Launch Alliance. So that United Launch Alliance is in partnership with two of the biggest American space contractors. So I believe that India should go that way. It should have space contractors. And by space contractors, I mean private sector companies that are behemoths in space. You need those kind of players. There has been great emphasis on startups all this while, but startups alone won't be able to take you up there. You need the big conglomerates of India to come up and pick up these strategic technologies. They might be from the bygone era, but at least, but they're still usable.
So last question, looking ahead at the rest of this year, what do you expect to see?
So July is quite busy, it seems. So as has been regularly mentioned, not yet formally, but July is when the Chandrayaan-3 will be launched. You have the Aditya L1 solar observatory, a solar telescope which is placed in the outer space. That is to be launched. That mission has been long pending, and I'm sure all the solar physicists who have been associated with that mission will be really happy to see it fly and start operations. That is one. Gaganyaan, you've seen the news. The Navy has taken charge of testing the capsule and the way it lands on the waters. So a lot of tests are happening, and Gaganyaan is again in the works. So you will see it's a busy year. There's a lot happening. There are a lot of developments on the space economy front. Indian space companies are becoming cynosure of eyes. We have the Space 20 meeting, the Space Economy Leaders meeting, happening in July again, and this is part of the G20. So this is where heads of space agencies of all these 19 countries will come together. They'll gather in Bengaluru, and together they'll chart global space policies, and global space policies that will endure for the next few years. So, right from space diplomacy to space technology to internal space policy to space security to space strategy, we're working on all fronts. And that's why I'm actually quite glad that we started this venture for Interstellar, because there's a lot to cover, there's a lot to analyze, and I hope the country benefits from all this that we are doing.
Fascinating, Chaitanya, as always. Space is one really fascinating arena. So thanks very much, and I'm glad you could find the time to sit with us and talk about this.
Thank you.
That's all we have for you tonight on The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media and Twitter. Thank you and good night.